Here are some quick questions to help you test your knowledge for Edexcel GCSE Chemistry Paper 1. If you haven't seen the full video going through everything you need to know for the paper, it's worth watching that first. Link is in the description. And you will need a calculator for some of these questions. What's the difference between elements, compounds and mixtures? An element is a substance made from only one type of atom, say oxygen atoms. A compound is a substance made from two or more different types of atoms chemically bonded together. For example, water is H2O, hydrogen and oxygen bonded together. A mixture is two or more different elements or compounds that are not chemically bonded together. For example, air. That's a mixture of nitrogen molecules, oxygen molecules, water and more. Balance this chemical equation. Might be worth pausing for this one. Remember, we can't change the little numbers. So balancing the phosphorus, we put a 2 on the right to give us 4 phosphoruses on both sides, but that gives us 6 oxygens on the right now, so we put a 3 in front of the O2 on the left to balance them. How would you get pure water from a solution of salt water? You use distillation. Heat the solution so the water, the solvent, evaporates, then use a condenser to turn that back into liquid, leaving the salt, the solute, behind. Describe the states of matter, solid, liquid and gas. In a solid, the particles vibrate about fixed positions. They're very tightly packed and so they cannot be compressed. In a liquid, the particles are still touching, but they're free to move past each other. Also can't be compressed. In a gas, the particles move with fast speeds, with high kinetic energy, and they're far apart, which means that they can be compressed. What did Rutherford discover about the atom and how? Rutherford fired alpha particles, which are positively charged, at a thin gold leaf. Most of these went through, while some were deflected back. This showed that every atom is mostly empty space, while having a small and positive charge in the middle, which we call the nucleus now. Complete the table to show the relative charge and mass of subatomic particles. Protons are positive, so we just say +1 relatively speaking. Neutrons are neutral, so 0, while electrons are negative, so they're -1 or -1 you might say. Protons and neutrons basically have the same mass, so we say they're just 1 relatively, while electrons have a very small mass in comparison, so we can say very small or just 0. What do the numbers on an element symbol mean? The bottom number is the atomic number, and that's the number of protons in the atom's nucleus. An atom will also have the same number of electrons to balance out the charges to make it neutral, but remember that an ion will not, as it will have lost or gained electrons. The top number is the mass, or relative atomic mass, or RAM for short. This is equal to the number of protons plus neutrons in the nucleus. So to find the number of neutrons, we just do top number minus the bottom number. That's the mass number, take away the number of protons. How do electrons fill up shells in atoms, up to calcium, which has 20 electrons? It's 2, 8, 8, 2. The first shell has a maximum of 2 electrons, the second shell has a maximum of 8, etc. What do metals always do when they bond? Ionic bonding to be precise. And what is magnesium's ion if it's in group 2? Metals always donate their outer electron or electrons to leave an empty outer shell. Magnesium being in group 2 means it has 2 electrons in its outer shell, which it must donate when bonding. As electrons are negative, it's left with a charge of 2+, so its ion is Mg2+. Remember that transition metals are special because they can form different ions. For example, iron can be Fe2+ or Fe3+. Non-metals can take part in ionic bonding or covalent bonding. What's the difference? In ionic bonding, non-metal atoms will accept electrons from metals to get a full outer shell of electrons, and they become negative ions or anions in the process. Non-metals can also bond to each other by sharing electrons to get a full outer shell instead. This is covalent bonding. What are the alkali metals, halogens and noble gases, and how do their reactivity vary? Group 1 are the alkali metals. They all have one electron in their outer shell. Their name comes from the fact that they produce an alkali when reacting with water. This reaction is more violent down the group because that outer electron is further from the nucleus, so is removed more easily. Group 7 are the halogens. They get more reactive as you go up the group, as it's easier for an electron to be accepted when the outer shell is closer to the nucleus. Group 0, or sometimes called Group 8, are the noble gases. As they have full outer shells already, they are very unreactive. To all intents and purposes, they don't react. Describe metallic bonding and explain why metals are good conductors as a result. Metal atoms bond to each other with metallic bonding. They form a lattice, a grid of ions, and they're surrounded by a sea of delocalized electrons. As these electrons are free to move, this makes them good conductors of electricity and heat. What is the chemical formula for iron 3 oxide? You need to know that oxygen is in group 6. You might want to pause for this one. Iron 3 means the ion Fe3+, while oxygen ions are O2- because they need to gain 2 electrons to get a full outer shell of 8. When bonded together, their charges must add up to 0, so we must have 2 lots of the iron and 3 lots of oxygen. 6 pluses, 6 minuses, they add up to 0. So the formula is Fe2O3. Draw the structural formula and dot and cross diagram for methane, 1 carbon surrounded by hydrogens. Carbon is in group 4, so it always makes 4 covalent bonds to get a full outer shell of 8. Every hydrogen only makes 1 bond each in order to get a full outer shell of 2. That means methane is CH4. A line represents 1 covalent bond in structural formula, and that's always a dot cross electron pair in a dot and cross diagram. What are the properties of ionic compounds and simple covalent compounds? Ionic compounds have high melting points due to the strong ionic bonds. They can only conduct electricity when molten, melted, or in solution, dissolved, as the ions can move in these states. Simple covalent molecules have relatively low melting and boiling points because there are only weak intermolecular forces that need overcoming with heating to melt or evaporate them. They cannot conduct electricity. How can graphite conduct electricity but diamond cannot, even though they're both giant covalent structures and allotropes of carbon? Graphite consists of hexagonal layers of carbons making 3 covalent bonds each. The 4th unused delocalized electron on each carbon forms weak bonds between the layers. These electrons are able to move between the layers to conduct electricity. Diamond is made of carbons with 4 covalent bonds each. There are no electrons free to move. What is the relative formula mass of magnesium hydroxide using their individual relative atomic masses, or RAMs? A hydroxide OH group is 17. Add 2 lots of this to magnesium's 24 and you have a relative mass, we still might say RAM for short, of 58. This of course is in grams per mole. How many moles is 29 grams of magnesium hydroxide? We use the equation moles equals grams over rams, and that gives us 0.5 moles. How many grams of water are needed to make 116 grams of magnesium hydroxide? You will want to pause the video if you want to have a go at this one. Okay, here we go. The stoichiometry of water to magnesium hydroxide is 2 to 1, according to the balanced equation, meaning we must have double the moles of water, so that's 4 moles. Finally, rearranging our moles equation, we find that grams equals moles times rams, so that's 4 times 18, that's 72 grams of water needed. What is a limiting reactant? It's the reactant that runs out first in a reaction. For example, if we have 1 mole of magnesium and 2 moles of water, there should be neither left over when the reaction has completed. If you have 3 moles of water though, the water is in excess, we say, as the magnesium will run out first. The magnesium is the limiting reactant in this case. How many grams of salt, sodium chloride, RAM of 58.5, would you need to dissolve in 2,000 centimeters cubed of water to make a 0.2 molar or moles per decimeter cubed solution? Pause the video for this one. First, convert centimeters cubed to decimeters cubed by dividing by 1,000, so that's 2 decimeters cubed. If you can't remember the equation for concentration, remember that units are your friends. We need moles, but we've been given 0.2 moles per decimeter cubed, or moles divided by decimeters cubed. So multiplying by our volume of 2 decimeters cubed, well, we're just left with moles, and that's 0.4 moles. Finally, using moles equals grams over rams again, we see grams equals moles times rams, so 58.5 times 0.4 means we need 23.4 grams of sodium chloride. When do you use the percentage yield and atom economy equations? You use percentage yield when you're given actual masses of reactants and products. We use it to find out how much of a product is made in reality. Atom economy, on the other hand, uses rams of reactants and products to find out how much of a desired product we'd get compared to the total amount of reactants used. What is meant by a displacement reaction? When an ionic compound generally encounters a more reactive metal or non-metal, this metal or non-metal will displace or take the place of the less reactive one that's in the compound. It gets kicked out. What is meant by oxidation and reduction? Remember oil rig. Oxidation is loss, reduction is gain of electrons. What determines the pH of an acid or alkali? The greater the concentration of H+ ions, the more acidic a solution is. That's a pH less than 7. Above 7, the more alkali a solution is, the greater the concentration of OH- ions. Every pH change of 1 is equivalent to 10 times the concentration of these ions, so a pH difference of 2 means a concentration difference of 100 times. How many moles of sodium hydroxide, NaOH, would you need to neutralize 3 moles of sulfuric acid, H2SO4, and what are the products? You'd need double the number of moles of sodium hydroxide, so 6 moles. That's because for every H+ in the acid, you need an OH- in the alkali to neutralize it. The products of an acid and alkali neutralizing are always a salt and water. In this case, the salt is sodium sulfate. In electrolysis of solutions, what occurs at the anode and cathode? Positive ions, or cations, remember cats, they're positive, are attracted to the cathode, which is negative. There, they gain electrons from the cathode, and so this is reduction. The opposite happens at the anode. Anions lose electrons, they're oxidized instead. Again, in electrolysis of solutions, what determines what's made at the cathode and anode? If the dissolved metal ion is more reactive than hydrogen, then it will stay in solution, and hydrogen is produced at the cathode. If less reactive, hydrogen stays in the solution and the metal is reduced at the cathode instead. It's generally oxygen that's produced at the anode, unless the non-metal in solution is a halogen, chlorine, bromine or fluorine. If that's the case, then they're produced at the anode instead and oxygen stays in the solution. What happens when iron, copper and aluminium corrode, and how can this be avoided? Iron corrodes when it reacts with oxygen and water. This is also called rusting in iron's case. This makes iron oxide, which is brown. Copper reacts with oxygen, making copper oxide, which is green. Similarly, aluminium oxide is white. Using a sacrificial metal that's more reactive can reduce corrosion, as it corrodes before the metal it's protecting. Zinc is an example of this. We call doing this with zinc galvanizing. Why are alloys stronger than pure metals? Alloys are stronger because the different size atoms disrupt the lattice, the pattern, making it harder for the layers to slide past each other. What is Le Chatelier's principle, and how does it apply to pressure, concentration and temperature? The Chatelier's principle applies to reversible reactions. It's this: if a system at equilibrium is subjected to a change, the system will adjust to counteract the change. In practice, this means the following: a higher concentration or pressure will favour the reaction that makes the fewest moles. In this case, that's the forward reaction. So increasing the concentration or pressure will make more of what's on the right here. Increasing temperature favours the endothermic reaction. That makes sense, doesn't it? The hotter it is, the harder it is for the exothermic reaction, the reaction that produces heat, to do that. And of course the opposite is true as well. In chromatography, how is RF value calculated? RF, or retention factor, is the ratio of how far the substance, for example an ink pigment, has moved up the stationary phase, say filter or chromatography paper, compared to how far the mobile phase, for example water, has moved. These are measured from where the substance started, which is of course why we draw the baseline in pencil, which doesn't move with the mobile phase. What are the optimal conditions for making ammonia using the Haber process, and why are these chosen? We use a catalyst, a temperature of 450 degrees C and a pressure of around 200 atmospheres. A high temperature increases the rate of reaction, but it favours the reverse reaction, which is endothermic, so it can't be too high. Using a high pressure though favours the forward reaction, as there are fewer moles on the right. What chemicals are used to make NPK fertilizers? Ammonia is used to make ammonium salts to give plants the N, nitrogen, in the NPK. They need it for amino acids and therefore proteins. Phosphate, the P, is a rock that can be mined, then treated with an acid before being added to the fertilizer. This plays an important part in photosynthesis. Potassium chloride and potassium sulfate are obtained by mining. The potassium, the K in NPK, is needed for plants to regulate the opening and closing of their stomata. Leave a like and a comment if you found this helpful. All the best for your exam, and I'll see you next time.